Hey everybody, welcome back to another developer interview. For this conversation, I had the pleasure of speaking with David, aka Dayeed of d.a.s Games, and the solo developer of Cyberfrags 69. And if you have no idea what that game is, you should go check my channel where I have an expose of it up right now. But in short, think of it as Titanfall 2 had a baby with Quake 3 Arena. And the game currently has 100% positive reviews on Steam, which is really impressive. So yeah, let's hop right into the interview. I hope you enjoy. Alright, so today, ladies and gentlemen, I'm with David, who has created a game on Steam called Cyberfrags 69. The way that I kind of was introduced to the game is that it's a cross between Quake and Titanfall 2 with its own really interesting artistic style. I've gotten to know David just a little bit through DMs, through Discord. We played a couple times, had a couple of good matches, and really enjoying Cyberfrags. It's a pretty small game, not super well known out there yet. I'd love to get the word out more. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this interview, as well as get some insight as to what it takes to kind of teach yourself game development, and just kind of get some insight into David's mind of how he came up with Cyberfrags. So thank you for joining me today for this little chat, David.
Oh yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, let's just jump right into it. The first thing I love to ask is, what kind of classic games or shooters did you play growing up that might have helped inspire your passion project here?
Well, so growing up, I actually had a bit of a, what's the word, maybe spotty is the right word, experience with video games growing up. They have some very conservative parents, and they thought of that sort of thing as fairly frivolous, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I didn't actually get a lot of early video game experience growing up. My first experience playing video games was probably in 2004 or so. My family had a move, and where we ended up moving, the former owner had left a computer that had Battlefield 1943 and Age of Empires 2 on it.
Okay.
And I was a young kid at the time. I couldn't comprehend the complexity of something like Age of Empires 2. I remember spending a lot of time messing around with that, a little bit of time playing against bots in Battlefield 1943. And then it wasn't until much later, Xbox 360 era, that I started actually like gaming, right around when Mass Effect 3 came out.
Okay.
Spent a lot of time playing that, Call of Duty 4, those sorts of games. Those are probably my more formative experiences, actually, is those games, that Xbox 360 era, when I really first started getting into it.
Very cool. Out of those games or the ones that you played previously on that older computer, what would you say is your personal favorite game of all time?
So actually, of all time, it's a tough one, but I think I'd actually have to go with, oddly enough, Red Faction Guerrilla.
Oh yeah, I know that game.
Yeah, that one with the destruction engine that it had, and it really made my imagination really start spinning with what video games are capable of doing. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That one really struck a chord with me, and that's probably that's the first game I ever bought, was Red Faction Guerrilla, the first one. Got it on Steam. I couldn't even run it at the time on the crappy Windows XP computer I had, but I had that game. I eventually ended up playing it on Xbox, so I guess I bought it twice. But every computer that's been able to run games ever since then, I've always had that installed, just so I can pull it up every once in a while and blow some shit up.
Nice. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Well, let's transition a little bit into a question specifically about Cyberfrags 69. When you started development on it, did you purposely seek out to create the wall running mechanic, which to me, if we had to pick out something that's iconic for your game, it would be the wall running. So was the wall running something that you set for your game right out of the gates, or did that develop over time?
I would certainly say it developed over time, though I would say I wouldn't even say that at the time, before wall running became a thing, that I was actually looking at making a game. I'd made some prototypes and this, that, the other, learning Unreal Engine, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to sit down and I'm going to see if I can make something simple. But when I actually sat down and I started working on a shooter, I'm like, I'm going to do something super simple. I'm going to do move, shoot, and have all the things that you need, a menu, a game mode, starting and ending the game, those sorts of things that aren't mechanics, but kind of build out what makes a game a game. So that was my goal at the time. So when I was making that, my first thing to do was just make a gun. And then my next thing is, okay, well, what do I need after that? Well, I need a target. I need something that has a head and a body, and I can shoot those things. So I went through and I just kind of went step by step, just getting, finish a thing and then ask myself, what's next? And I think the big turning point for me when I realized that this could be something more feature complete than just a prototype was right around, like you said, with the wall running. I realized that moving and shooting being the two only real mechanics in the game requires a certain amount of depth for both of those things, and adding extra movement mechanics that didn't clutter up the control scheme really appealed to me. So that's where wall running kind of came in, and also it's a different mechanic. It's something that I hadn't done yet in Unreal Engine, and it gave me something to learn.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool. And there's a lot of other movement mechanics in your game as well. So I guess it's a good segue into my next question. I've noticed while playing your game, you pick up guns randomly, so you never know which one you're going to get. But each one's like a new surprise because they each have their primary, which is to kill the player. But then a lot of them have secondary fire modes where, like, one, for example, shoots out jump pads that you can then use to jump on it. Or there's another one that has a grapple hook. I think that that's actually a really fantastic idea. It adds a lot to the game. So when you're adding stuff like that into your project, are these just ideas that you think of and you're like, oh, that sounds cool, and then you just add it in? Or do you have like a more in-depth process where you really are brainstorming these ideas out? Kind of explain the process of how you're putting these weapons into your project.
So a lot of times it is just me just having an idea, right? I'll just be working on Cyberfrags or even just watching a movie or a TV show or something alike. I'm like, hey, that's a neat idea. And then just prototyping it out and seeing how it goes. I have over 30 guns in the game, so it kind of happens, happens quite a bit. It's just one of those things where I think it really comes down to my having movement mechanics that didn't clutter up the control scheme is why I attach these things to guns rather than being a ability or something like that. And so that's why all those kind of movement weapons are there. But as far as coming up with them, it just kind of happens. It's kind of like coming up with an idea and then figuring out how that idea fits within the mechanics of the game as they currently stand,
Yeah. Well, it's got to be awesome to just be an indie dev and this is your project and you can just kind of do whatever the fuck you want with it. And if it works, great, then great. And if not, you can tweak it. But in that same vein, I know that doing a passion project like this a lot of the times for somebody is a side project. And I know that you have told me that you're not quite a full-timer quite yet on your project, but if you had all the time in the world to just focus on this, what do you think would be like the main thing that you would add or work on with Cyberfrags to really elevate it to the next level?
That's a bit of a tough question. For me, I think it's less about the whole time of the thing, because I can sit down and I can work on it. I think the biggest thing for me is finding some way to supplement my weaknesses as a developer. I'm not a big artist, for example. I have a little bit of experience hard surface modeling with Cyberfrags, but not really much of a texture artist or anything like that. So things like that are really difficult for me. So that's why it's so cartoony, for example. Certain things like the heat mechanic, for example. That one's actually a consequence of my inability to animate. When I was like, okay, I need a reload animation, I'm like, well, screw reloading. If I can't make an animation for it, let's just make it a heat thing, and they can just turn the gun to the side.
And it works out super well. It actually balances all your weapons really well, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, and that also led to all sorts of other mechanics. Being a consequence of not being able to animate becomes this whole other thing, you know what I mean? This whole mechanic that becomes another fundamental to the game.
Well, when you're developing, what to you is the most time-consuming aspect of development? Is it art? Is it coding? Is it bug squashing?
That's a good question. I'm not the kind of person who actually puts down and kind of punches myself in and out, you know what I mean? So I don't really know exact numbers when it comes to things like this, especially because for me, they feel very different in how long they take. When I'm making a mechanic, things feel like they're going really, really fast, you know, because it's something new, it's something fresh. But what feels the longest for me is anything to do with art. Environment art is probably my weakest aspect of it. of everything, so that seems to take the longest for me.
I already kind of asked you. Well, I guess you already answered this next question in one of the previous questions we were talking about earlier. My question was about you being self-taught. In his Cyberfrags, your first project, you mentioned how you've had a ton of prototypes. So I guess my question is, what has kind of been your learning process to get to where you're at right now with Cyberfrag 69?
I mean, my more recent game development journey is, just Unreal Engine, starting probably, I think it was January 21 when I started messing with Unreal Engine. I had some dirtling with other things, like back when Blender had a game engine years and years and years ago and stuff like that. But Unreal Engine was the first time I was actually able to sit down, mess around with the blueprint system, and actually get a result immediately.
Yeah.
And so that really allowed me to engage myself with it a lot more than previous attempts at something like Unity or something that requires prior coding knowledge to make work, The first project I actually sat down, I'm like, I have an idea and I want to make something, was this goofy little prototype I made called Marching Band Simulator. Because I was in marching band growing up, and all the way throughout middle school, high school, college, whatnot. And so I figured, well, this is something I know. You would make the formation, and then you would set each formation, and they would move automatically between the formations. And the goal was to not have everybody fall over by running into each other. And so, you could watch them finger the trumpets, or slide the trombone slides or the tubas or whatever, and actually get the correct fingering. And it was just this goofy thing, and it was actually really satisfying to make something like that, because I end up having to make all these different fun little algorithms to make all the little the formations. That prototype allowed me to kind of cement some of my understanding between the interactions between different parts of the game systems and this, that, the other. And
awesome. Yeah. Well, you gotta add yourself like a trumpet weapon into Cyberfrags now.
That's
something like that.
It's a good idea. I completely...
Just something ridiculous, You already got the fart slam. You've got some of these other ridiculous weapons that jetpack you around. Why not add some musical silliness to your game?
Maybe a big hit scan shotgun, like as a sound.
There you go.
Or something
there you
like
go.
That. Yeah.
That's
a good idea.
Going now. Got the juices going.
You did. In the next couple of days, you might see something goofy happen. We'll see.
Awesome. Love to hear it. Well, what about just challenges developing Cyberfrags? What has been just a pretty significant challenge that you were able to overcome that, once you had it done, you're like, holy shit, I'm glad I got through that?
I mean, there's all sorts of little individual things that pop up here and there that certainly have that effect. There was this one time I had this really persistent crash that kept happening over the course of weeks and weeks and weeks, and I realized it was part of my projectile system and how I had a particle effect attached to it, but I had changed the projectile system. So having an empty particle effect there ended up crashing the game for some reason. Stuff like that kind of happens all the time, you know what I mean? These little things that crop up that get in the way. The most difficult and persistent thing, I think, challenge I had to overcome was probably movement, multiplayer replication over high latency scenarios specifically. There's this guy on the Discord. He's one of the moderators now. He's out in Germany, and he really helped me out. When I first put this up on Steam, he was one of the first people to hop into the Discord, and we hit it off, and we ended up playing a lot of one-on-ones with each other. And if it wasn't for him and playing all this stuff over this high latency scenario, a lot of this Cyberfrags wouldn't be anywhere near as smooth as it is now. The movement mechanics were very, very jittery under those, because Germany for me is 130 milliseconds.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is usually totally playable, but back then on Cyberfrags it was not. All the rubber banding and this, that, the other. Eventually I was able to get through because of all that playtesting and actually get it to smooth out in those scenarios, and that was the longest running, incremental improvement kind of challenges that had to be overcome for sure.
Well, I think you should pat yourself on the back for that, because as somebody who's played your game just a handful of times, and I've played it both on LAN and online already, it is really a smooth experience.
I will say I can't take full credit for that, because I did I am leaning heavily on the crutch of this free plugin that's on the Unreal Marketplace called Smooth Network Movement, and I ended up reworking my movement system to fit around this plugin because it just works and it's fantastic.
Nice. What are your long terms with your project? I know it's been you've been working on it for like 2 years since the Steam store says 2021. So do you have kind of a stopping goal in mind, or is this something that you're just going to plink away on for a long time to come?
I mean, as it stands right now, it's kind of in the plinking mode, you know what I mean? Because as of right now, it's like I said, like we discussed earlier, it's not really at the stage where it's going to be able to support me in any meaningful way. So plinking is just what it's going to have to be for now. I would like to get a full single player campaign, nothing long, but at least, anywhere between 5 or 10 levels that are pretty solid all the way around. I wouldn't say I feel particularly confident on the quality of what's in there currently. So like, single player is definitely something I'm looking at expanding and improving upon as I move forward. But as I said before, those sorts of things, particularly the art side of that, is where I find the most challenging. So single player and stuff like that really takes the longest for me to hammer out. So I like to do that. I have a lot of multiplayer maps in there right now, but I would always like to improve the quality. Perhaps remove some that are doing less well, that sort of thing. Just overall kind of tighten things up on the multiplayer end of things. Maybe expand co-op a little bit as well. Those sorts of things for sure. But as far as like a completing Cyberfrags, it would probably, the single player is probably the biggest milestone for that. Like as far as 1.0 happens, will probably happen once I feel good about the single player side of things for sure.
Gotcha. Well, that basically is pretty much all the questions I had prepared for you. I guess the last one is, do you have future projects in mind, or do you think you're just gonna work on this one until it's at a good spot, and then what's kind of the future looking like for you in your indie game design career right now?
So Cyberfrags is definitely like the main focus, without a doubt. Moving forward, sequels or further projects will certainly depend on the success of Cyberfrags. Obviously, I'm very, very, very proud of the reception so far as reviews and people's opinions and experience of the game. I'm very, very proud of how much people are enjoying it. But so far as continuing on in the future, unless it becomes at least a certain amount self-sufficient, another big project isn't really in my windshield. You know what I mean? I am doing prototypes here and there pretty consistently. For example, I'm a big fan of the author Brandon Sanderson. Every once in a while, I'll read a book of his or something along those lines, and I'll be like, man, that would be a really cool game mechanic. And so I'll like pull open Unreal and I'll make a new project and I'll hammer out a little bit of prototyping and see what happens, that sort of thing. And so I'm always prototyping. I'm always fooling around with that sort of stuff, and so I'll keep flexing my chops and sort of that. But as far as like big projects go, Cyberfrags, until that's done, then maybe I'll move on to something else. Cyberfrags becomes self-sufficient and I can hire some environment artists, maybe a level designer or something like that, a little bit of contract work, get that as good as I can, and then be able to springboard that into something bigger and better.
Awesome. Well, somebody who found your game on a whim and jumped into it and really enjoyed it right away, I personally am very much rooting for you. My channel, I do my best to feature projects like yours, or I'm trying to go more down the road of modding communities and smaller developments like yourself. And I know I'm a small channel right now, and hopefully it will get some more eyes on you. But I
appreciate it regardless, man. It's any new eyes.
Thank you again so much for taking the time to chat with me this evening. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to seeing how things develop. I'll be around in your community playing games with you, providing feedback, and if you ever have anything that you are throwing out there that you're really excited about, I'm always happy to maybe even throw something up on my channel and just try to get what eyes I can out there. So
I really appreciate that, man. Yeah, I'm just trying to make something fun, and I'm glad people are having fun with it. And if that becomes more, then amazing. And I really appreciate any help towards that goal. And thanks for having me, man.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks again, and we will chat with you hopefully another time down the road. Thanks, David. All right, everybody, I really hope you enjoyed this interview. Again, that was me speaking with David, aka Dayeed of d.a.s Games, sole developer of Cyberfrags 69. It's $5 on Steam, guys. I highly recommend you go pick it up. It's a blast. Go join his Discord. Go play. It's really, really fun. If you're enjoying this interview format, please let me know in the comments below. I have a couple more interviews coming out, and I need to go find some more developers to reach out to, but I only want to do that if you guys are having a good time. So please let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Guys, thank you so much for hanging out. I'm SaltyOctopus, and I'll see you next time.